Hey guys, tonight we step into sandals older than memory, into the cool stone corridors of an ancient Egyptian temple, just as the sun begins to bow behind the desert horizon. You're not a pharaoh or a noble tonight. No gold collar, no throne. You're something far less glamorous and far more exhausted. You're a priest of the house of life. You've been up since before the ibis birds started squawking, and now you're preparing for the second shift, the nighttime duties. The courtyard behind you hums with the final murmurs of daytime rituals. Dust kicks up behind retreating sandals. A goat bleats, confused, probably because someone fed it date beer again. The sandstone beneath your feet radiates the last of the day's heat. In front of you, the temple's entry yawns wide, tall columns casting cool shadows like the ribs of a slumbering giant. You remove your sandals. It's forbidden to enter the inner temple with the dirt of the outside world clinging to your soles. It's also a convenient excuse to stop walking for a second. Because yes, your knees ache. And yes, you haven't had a proper nap since the flood season. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, let me know in the comments. Where are you listening from? And what time is it right now? Are you winding down in São Paulo? Half asleep in Manila? Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You step forward, barefoot now, into a world that smells of frankincense and cool stone. The temple isn't silent exactly, but its sounds are thick with reverence. There's a slow drip from a basin, the shuffle of papyrus sandals. Somewhere deep inside, someone knocks over a ceremonial bowl and mutters a very unpriestly phrase under their breath. At this hour, the temple breathes in, while the city exhales. Markets have closed, scribes rolled up their reed pens, and the Nile's gentle current laps against its banks like it's whispering secrets in its sleep. And here you are, another quiet figure inside a system older than most mountains. The first step of the nightly ritual? Leave the outside world behind, literally and metaphorically. You pass the outer pylons and enter the temple proper. The walls loom with carvings of gods mid-transformation. Falcon-headed Horus, cow-eyed Hathor, and Thoth, your favorite, though you'd never admit it out loud, always scribbling something, always watching. Historians still argue whether the average temple priest was literate or simply memorized the rituals by heart. If you're honest, you do a little of both. Your training was half recitation, half improvised panic. You remember once replacing an entire line of prayer with something about lentils. The god didn't seem to mind. You make your way through the hypostyle hall, the ceiling just visible above your oil lamp's glow. Every column is painted, carved, and consecrated. You brush your fingers along a hieroglyph here and there, a kind of tactile prayer, or maybe just a habit, like touching wood for luck. There's an odd comfort in how little changes here. Every night, the same motions, the same prayers, the same squeaky hinge on the storeroom door that no one's fixed for about 300 years. And yet, there's always the chance that tonight might be different. That the god might speak, or sigh, or sneeze. Probably not the last one, but you never know. You reach the antechamber, a small room where sandals are stacked like a sleepy army, and linen robes hang folded, scenting the air faintly of old incense and something that might once have been myrrh. You remove your working tunic, stiff from the morning heat, and hang it on its peg. Your skin shivers in the cool temple air, goosebumps racing down your arms as you wrap yourself in a fresh linen robe. It rustles softly, more like paper than fabric, fitted precisely, folded just so, because the gods, apparently, are fashion critics. You pause in the doorway before moving deeper. This is the moment of transition. Outside these walls, you were a man. Inside them, you're a vessel, a servant, a walking checklist of offerings and ritualistic foot placements, and also someone who really, really hopes no one drops a burning torch this time. Just then, you hear the distant clunk of a bronze gate locking into place, the final sound of the outer world being sealed out. It's just you, the shadows, and several dozen very sleepy statues. You take a breath. The stone smells damp. The air is cool and thick. Somewhere in the sanctum, a priest is humming. Another is clearing his throat dramatically, probably to cover up the fact that he forgot the next line of his incantation. Your oil lamp flutters gently in your hand. The light wavers, casting distorted gods onto the walls. You smile faintly. If the gods are watching, they haven't said much. Maybe they're listening. Or maybe they're dozing like temple cats in the sun. Either way, your shift has begun. The first thing your body wants to do is sit down, maybe even lie down. But the temple has other ideas. You make your way to the purification chambers, a quiet, echoing trio of rooms tucked behind the outer sanctum. These aren't places of luxury. No bubbling hot springs or masseuses named after deities. Just 3 pools, shallow and still, lined with limestone, their waters drawn from sacred sources, or, at least, sources someone has carved the word sacred above in hieroglyphs. You begin at the first basin. The air is chilly here, and your skin prickles even before the water touches it. The priests say it's essential to bathe before offering service to the gods. 3 times, in fact. 1 for the body, 1 for the soul, and 1 just to be sure. The logic is a little fuzzy, but the tradition is older than most dynasties, so you don't argue. You ease into the first basin. It's lukewarm, thankfully. None of that cold water at night nonsense the high priest sometimes insists on during festivals. You cup water in your hands and pour it slowly over your arms, your neck, your face. There's a set of incantations you're supposed to whisper with each motion. And while you mumble most of them accurately, there's a part where your voice trails off and becomes something suspiciously similar to na 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 something ra. It's fine, probably. Historians still argue whether every temple ritual was performed exactly as prescribed, or whether most priests improvised once the doors were shut, and the gods had metaphorically gone home. Based on your experience? A little of both. You once saw a colleague chant the same 3 lines for 20 minutes because he couldn't remember the next verse, and it worked just fine. The god in question didn't explode, so it must have been acceptable. The second basin is cooler. This one is scented, lotus and a bit of myrrh. You don't know who's in charge of proportions, but someone definitely overdid it with the lotus tonight. You smell like a florist's apprentice already. Still, it's calming. You kneel, submerge your hands again, and this time linger a moment longer. You think about the day, how a storage clerk dropped an entire amphora of honey, how a scribe got caught writing love poetry in the margins of an inventory scroll, how a sacred ibis got into the barley again and had to be escorted out like a drunk uncle from a feast. You let it all go, sinking into the quiet rhythm of water over skin. The third bath is small and set apart, dimly lit. No herbs, no perfume, just cold, clean water. This is the final rinse. You grit your teeth and lower yourself in quickly, muttering the most serious prayers now, ones meant to reach all the way to the stars. This is the water that separates you from the world entirely. If the first 2 baths washed away dust and distraction, this one erases your name. Here, you're no longer yourself. You're a conduit, a silhouette with a purpose. The cold shocks you, but also sharpens your focus. A few gasps later, you're done. You step out carefully, dripping, as another priest hands you a fresh cloth. You nod thanks. He nods back. No one speaks here. Too many echoes. Too many gods listening, perhaps, or just the awkward awareness that you've all seen each other soaking wet and praying to statues. Back in the drying room, you towel off briskly and begin the ritual dressing process. Another priest enters, a younger one who still folds his linen robes backwards sometimes. You offer him a brief nod as you both reach for your respective garments. Silent comrades in a very sleepy army. Your robe is fresh, crisp, smells faintly of cedar and a hint of beeswax, which is odd, but not unpleasant. You slide it over your shoulders, wrap it snug across your chest, and tie it with the ceremonial sash. Every fold has meaning. Left over right, then loop under, then double wrap if you're dealing with anything involving the crocodile gods. You're not tonight, thankfully. Last week, you got stuck in a knot and had to be rescued by a very amused acolyte. One last touch remains, the oil. You open a tiny alabaster jar, just wide enough for your fingertip. The scent hits you immediately, sandalwood and cinnamon. A priest's perfume. You dab it lightly on your wrists, behind your ears, and just a hint under your chin. It's not for vanity. It's for purity. The gods, rumor has it, have a nose for holiness, or at least for properly oiled forearms. You glance in the copper mirror on the wall. Your face stares back, older than yesterday, but less tired than expected. Your eyes have that strange glint again, the one you only see after the 3rd bath. Not sleep-deprived exactly, just softened, like a statue left in the sun. You reach for your lamp, still burning strong, still giving off that steady, comforting flicker. You pick it up, its handle warm in your palm, and step into the hallway beyond. The night is just beginning. The temple has been cleansed, and so have you. Far away, beyond these walls, the city sleeps. But here, where gods wait behind curtains and statues blink only in dreams, your real work begins. The temple is still, and your feet now move with the slow, rehearsed precision of someone who knows they're being watched, even if by a limestone statue. You pass between pillars etched with spells and praises, each step echoing gently. Your robe rustles like parchment with every motion, the scent of sandalwood rising up in calm waves. The storeroom is ahead. You push open the carved wooden door. It creaks, naturally, and step into the linen preparation chamber. Here, everything is quiet, but alive with significance. Stacks of folded linen rest on polished shelves. Some are snow-white and new, others slightly yellowed with age, but still blessed and usable. On the central table lies your next task, the ceremonial wrapping of offerings. But first, the robe check. You approach the wide bronze mirror again, one of the few luxuries allowed in the temple, and examine your silhouette. There's a ritual standard you're expected to meet. Every fold sharp, every corner tucked with symbolic alignment. Left flap over the right to mirror Mayat, the goddess of order. The sash must fall exactly 7 fingers from your waist. Too high, and you're accused of vanity. Too low, and someone will mutter about disrespecting the linen spirits, which may or may not exist. Historians still argue whether priests believed every thread of clothing carried divine energy, or if that was just something temple supervisors invented to keep everyone folding laundry properly. Either way, you smooth the fabric again, then turn toward the oils. There are 12 jars here. You only need one. But choosing is the hard part. Cedar for protection, myrrh for elevation, lotus for peace, frankincense if you're trying to impress the high priest. You settle on a blend of cinnamon and blue lotus, a choice both dignified and slightly rebellious. Cinnamon wasn't meant for everyday use, technically, but rules bend at night. You dip your fingertips into the jar and apply the oil carefully. Wrists, chest, back of the neck. A soft warmth follows each touch, like memories blooming on your skin. It's meant to open you to the divine, but mostly it makes your thoughts smell like pastries. Just then, a papyrus-thin voice floats down the corridor. Don't forget the god's towel this time. You flinch slightly. It's old Imhotep. No, not that Imhotep. Just an elder priest who's been around since before you had armpit hair. He's half blind and twice as smug. You call back, already packed it, which you haven't. You grab the small folded linen cloth on the shelf and add it to the tray of items you'll carry to the sanctuary. That was close. There's something oddly meditative about this part of the routine. You lay out the items for offering one by one. Bread, dates, a small clay jug of beer, a cluster of black grapes someone insisted were very fresh, even though you saw them fall off the altar this morning. Each item is wrapped lightly in a strip of blessed linen, like tucking a baby bird into a blanket. The gods don't eat in the normal sense. They absorb essence, which, conveniently, means leftovers. The cloths are knotted just so. The priestly knot, as it's known, is a complicated little loop that once took you 17 tries and a minor tantrum to learn. Now it comes easily. A twist, a loop, a gentle pull. The cloth holds. The offering is sealed. The gods, presumably, nod in silent approval. You pick up the tray. It's not heavy, but it has weight, like holding a secret. You walk slowly toward the inner sanctuary. The oil lamp you carry flickers a little more now. This corridor always has a slight breeze, even when the outer doors are shut tight. Some say it's the breath of Amun himself. Others say it's the cracked ceiling tile no one's bothered to fix. You'll take either explanation. Both feel equally likely at this hour. As you pass into the next chamber, the air changes. Cooler. Still. The smell of old incense clings to every surface. You hear soft chanting ahead. Two priests pacing slowly, heads bowed, lips murmuring a language so old it probably makes the gods nostalgic. You wait at the threshold. It's not polite to barge into divine presence, even if you're technically scheduled. One priest looks up, nods, and gestures you in. You step carefully around a slumbering cat curled near the altar, probably the same one that stole your sandals last week. You won't let it happen again. And there he is, the god. Not in person, of course, but in stone, towering and painted, a gilded crown perched on his head, his eyes inlaid with glass that catches the lamplight like something alive. This one is a local version of Horus, protector of kings and temples alike. He stands proud and unmoving, arms at his sides. Eternal vigilance carved into every line. You place the tray on the offering table in front of him. The priests nearby begin the welcome chant. You join in. Your voice is softer than theirs, but steadier. You've done this before. You know when to breathe between verses, when to let the vowels stretch like silk unraveling. The food is unwrapped, slowly, reverently, each piece lifted as if it weighed gold. The beer is poured into a tiny alabaster cup. A second cup is filled, then poured out behind the altar, an offering to the unseen. Maybe a spirit, maybe a servant god, or maybe just a custom no one remembers the origin of. You step back, bow once, and stand still. There's always a moment here where you half expect something dramatic. A gust of wind, a voice, a glowing halo. But the gods rarely perform on cue. Instead, you get the soft drip of water somewhere deep in the walls, a faint snore from the cat, and the strangely comforting thought that you've done what needed to be done. You are oiled, robed, and barefoot. The food has been given. The statue stands in silence, and with the offering made, you retreat a few steps, never turning your back to the statue, of course. That would be rude, possibly blasphemous, and certainly frowned upon by every supervising priest who still has enough energy left to frown at this hour. You ease yourself into a slow turn once you've backed far enough. Exiting the sanctuary just as two fresh priests enter to begin the next sequence of chants. You pass them like ghost ships in the corridor, each nodding politely, each slightly jealous that the other seems less tired. Outside, in the inner hallways of the temple, torchlight flickers on polished walls. The heat has dissipated now, replaced by that odd temple coolness that always smells faintly of stone dust, jasmine, and ancient secrets. Your next duty waits, the nightly chant circuit. You pick up a scroll from the small alcove to your left. The papyrus is cracked around the edges and smells faintly of oil and ash, just enough wear to suggest it's been read 1,000 times, but never too much to require rewriting. You unroll it halfway. The familiar hieroglyphs peer back at you like old friends with annoyingly complex grammar. Chanting is a curious job. It's not about melody, although some priests take creative liberties, especially if they think the gods enjoy a flourish. No, this is more about rhythm, a steady cadence, the repetition of sounds with such constancy that your tongue eventually separates from your brain and your voice runs on its own. You begin the chant softly as you walk, your voice just above a whisper. The sound bounces gently off the walls and columns, a ripple of sacred syllables moving through still air. The words are old, older than the temple itself, perhaps. You don't know their exact translation. No one does. Not anymore. But that doesn't stop the practice. Historians still argue, you recall with a smirk, whether the chants were always understood or were just passed down phonetically like bad family recipes. You lean toward the latter. After all, how else could anyone explain the line that might mean, "Bring light to the gods," or possibly, "Do not forget the onions"? Honestly, both could be accurate. Your circuit takes you past statues carved into the wall, each depicting lesser deities. Animal-headed and stern. You pause briefly at a baboon-shaped figure, probably Thoth's lesser-known cousin, and offer him a short verse and a polite bow. Some say skipping these smaller statues causes minor temple mischief. Flickering lamps, spilled oil, spontaneous lizard appearances. Better not to risk it. As your chant grows, so does your pace. Not hurried, but deliberate. Each step on the stone floor is in time with your breath. Each syllable pulses like a heartbeat. You pass a shadow that wasn't there a moment ago, but it's just another priest, barefoot and equally ghostly, making his own circuit. You meet eyes briefly, then glance away. It's considered respectful not to interrupt someone mid-chant, like sneezing during a eulogy. You continue down the hall toward the back sanctuary, where the oldest statues reside. These aren't the gleaming ones gilded in gold. These are chipped, faded, and beautiful in their own sleepy way. You bow before one of a lioness-headed goddess. Her name has been worn off the base, but she receives your verse nonetheless. The torchlight flickers as if approving. You reach the final arch of the circuit and feel a lightness in your chest. Not just because you're finished, though that's part of it, but because something always shifts after the chant. It's like your body exhales through the words, and you come out the other side a little less human, a little more hollow, but in a good way. A vessel emptied of the day's nonsense. You return the scroll to its alcove with a respectful tap of your fingers to the wood. A gesture not required, but one you picked up from an elder priest years ago. He claimed the gods appreciated flair. He also wore bells on his ankles during the solstice ceremonies, so take that with a grain of natron. As you head back through the hall, a cool draft brushes across your neck. The air shifts in strange ways at night here. Some say it's just airflow through cleverly placed slits in the stonework. Others say it's the gods stretching their limbs. You pass the sanctuary again and hear the soft hum of another chant beginning. A different voice now. Lower, slower. You smile faintly. It's old Imhotep. He never misses a syllable, even if he smells a bit too strongly of cedar and fish. You continue onward, back into the central hallway, where the lamp niches line the walls. You pause to check the wicks, tilting your lamp gently to relight one that's flickering low. Fire tends to behave oddly around the sanctified. Sometimes it dances when it shouldn't. Other times it sulks in the corner like a child denied dessert. You walk in silence now, letting your feet guide you to the storage rooms. Your next duty awaits, tucking in the gods. Yes, literally. The practice has an official name you always forget, something about sealing divine essence for nightly restoration. But it's essentially bedtime for statues. You've always found it charming, if slightly absurd. The gods are eternal, infinite, and all-powerful, but apparently still appreciate a nice linen wrap and a whispered goodnight. You gather the small linens, clean, folded, pre-blessed, and head into the second sanctuary, where the smaller statues reside. These aren't the towering ones. These are household-sized, made of alabaster or bronze, often gifted by nobles or devotees who hoped proximity to holiness might rub off on their taxes. You wrap them gently, each with a different cloth, each fold done according to the old diagrams still posted discreetly on the wall like bedtime origami guides. You whisper a short line to each one. Not from the scrolls, just something soothing. Rest well, you murmur to a falcon-headed statue. No disasters tonight. Please, you tell the god of the Nile. No one hears but you, and maybe the gods, and possibly the cat watching from the lintel with narrowed, judgmental eyes. You place the final cover across the tiny lion god and step back, satisfied. You ease back into the corridor, careful not to bump your tray against the doorframe. Even minor clatters feel disruptive in this hour of hush. The temple is not silent exactly. It hums with layered quiet. The faint hiss of oil lamps, the soft patter of bare feet in distant halls, and once in a while, a yawn you pretend not to hear. It's time for the records. You follow a narrow passage lit by inset lamps until it opens into the scribal chamber, one of the few rooms where speech is more common than chanting. Scrolls line the walls in neatly tied bundles, some marked with colored threads, others bearing hasty illustrations: ducks, wheat, a stylized crocodile holding a fish. The scribes have their own sense of humor. And too much time with ink. Tonight, you're not here to compose poetry or decode omens. You're here to log, as in log everything. Offerings made, baths taken, statues wrapped. Someone must record it all, or the gods might forget. Or worse, the high priest might forget, and ask you what was offered 2 nights ago to the minor frog deity in storage room C. You pull out the ledger scroll and unroll it across the table. The reed pen is already waiting, its bristles stained dark from overuse. You dip it gently into a shallow inkwell and begin to write. The ink smells slightly of fish guts and tree sap, an unfortunate but holy combination. You write slowly, forming each glyph with practiced care. 4th month of inundation season, day 12. Evening rituals began after sunset. 3 ritual baths completed. Horus fed, bread, beer, grapes, fig. Chants of Sekhmet and Thoth completed. Statues wrapped. Linen knot held on 2nd try. Victory. You pause, unsure whether to include the sandal theft from last week, maybe in the footnotes. Behind you, the scroll shelves creak softly, settling like elderly furniture. One of the scribes stirs from a corner mat, mumbling about ink demons in his sleep. You consider logging that too, but decide against it. Dream records are for the Night Watch priests. Historians still argue whether temple records like this were kept for spiritual purposes or simple bureaucratic order. Probably both. Ancient Egypt ran on ritual, but also receipts. Priests were holy, but also accountants. Divine bookkeepers in linen. Your next entry is a little trickier. Omens observed. 1 cat circled altar 3 times counterclockwise. Possible rain. Torch near Hathor's niche sputtered repeatedly. Requires inspection. Linen storage door opened on its own. Possibly wind, or possibly Sobek again. Sobek, god of the Nile, is not known for subtlety. If something leaks, floods, or splashes inappropriately, he's always the prime suspect. There is a crocodile in the courtyard pool after all, and some claim it's a divine avatar. Others say it's just a very pampered pet with dramatic instincts. You roll your eyes at your own thought. The crocodile isn't technically your responsibility. But when no one else is awake, guess who gets to check on it? You. You set down the pen, give the ink a moment to dry, and stretch. The room is warm. The stone bench unforgiving. You glance over the shelves, rows and rows of temple history, scrolls going back decades. The oldest ones are barely readable now, their edges curled and faded. You tried to copy one once. It took 6 hours and gave you a headache that lasted all through offering prep. A soft knock at the door breaks your thoughts. A younger priest pokes his head in, holding a small woven basket. "Bread deliveries," he whispers, setting the bundle down by the far wall. Temple bakers prepare dozens of tiny loaves daily, all ritually approved and dusted with the kind of flour that costs twice as much and tastes exactly the same. You nod your thanks and motion for him to take a scroll on the desk back to archives. He salutes with a yawn and wanders off, likely headed for a nap behind a statue of Anubis. You tuck the ledger away, tying the red cord around its scroll edges. Then, you light a small votive flame in the chamber's corner niche, a tradition held since the Old Kingdom. It's meant to guide scribes in their dreams, though it mostly just keeps the mice out. And now, for the less dignified part. You head toward the storeroom. This particular chamber is long and narrow, lined with baskets, sealed jars, and dusty shelves filled with everything from dried onions to ceremonial wigs. You duck slightly to avoid the low beam, which you've hit your head on more times than you care to admit, and step inside. And immediately, you hear a noise, a soft, scrabbling sound, not entirely threatening, but definitely not ideal. You freeze, then sigh. It's the mouse again. He's made his way into the barley stores. Again. You shuffle forward, whispering a half-hearted shoo, which he ignores completely. He's not scared of you. He knows the temple rules. No killing anything during sacred hours. You are, technically, not allowed to even swat. You reach into a basket, pull out a dried fig, and toss it to the far corner. The mouse obliges, scampering after it with an air of smug familiarity. You make a mental note to write that down, too. Just as you turn to leave, something ripples in the water outside the narrow window slit. You step closer. There it is, the courtyard pool. Moonlight dances across its surface like someone spilled melted silver. And gliding slowly beneath, a pair of eyes, the crocodile, still awake. You wonder, not for the first time, if it ever really sleeps, or if it just waits, listening, judging, planning, maybe. But for now, it's quiet, peaceful, almost elegant, in that mildly threatening way reptiles manage so well. You murmur a short prayer to Sobek, just in case. And then, gently, you pull the shutter closed. Because gods or not, you still have work to do. And you don't need a crocodile watching you fold linen. The temple feels heavier now, not in a threatening way, just denser. Like the air has thickened with hours and incantations, with all the linen and offerings and cat judgment. You step carefully, your lamp casting long shadows behind jars and columns. The stone is cool beneath your bare feet, and the night is at its midpoint, which means it's time to put the moon to work. You head toward the central sanctuary, the highest and most precisely aligned part of the temple. It's not the grandest room, not gilded or crowded with statues, but it has a secret. At exactly one point in the lunar cycle, when the moon passes over a certain slit in the ceiling, a narrow shaft of moonlight pierces the gloom and falls perfectly across the altar. Tonight is that night. You pass through the outer corridor and pull aside the linen veil guarding the entrance. No doors here, only sacred fabric. Gold thread woven into pure white, the bottom edge just barely brushing your shoulder. You duck and enter. The room is dark at first. Your lamp flickers and steadies, revealing a wide stone chamber, surprisingly bare. One low altar sits at the center, a circle of polished basalt. Atop it rests a single jar, sealed with wax and tied with a ceremonial blue cord. You don't touch it. You never do. No one does. It contains something. Depending on who you ask, it might be sacred oil or breath captured from the god himself. Or just a jar someone forgot about 3 dynasties ago, and now everyone's too nervous to open. The air smells clean here, almost unnaturally so, like the desert after a storm. You walk slowly around the perimeter, lighting the 4-corner votives. The flickering light doesn't quite reach the center, leaving the altar in quiet shadow. And then it begins. The moon slips into place overhead, its glow sharpened into a blade of silver as it cuts through the ceiling slit. Slowly, silently, the beam stretches, like a finger reaching down from the sky. It touches the center of the altar, and suddenly the basalt gleams like it's alive. You exhale. Every time, it's beautiful. Historians still argue whether these lunar alignments were intentional architectural features or lucky accidents. But standing here now, with that single thread of moonlight precisely illuminating an altar built centuries before your grandmother's grandmother was born, you suspect it was no accident. You kneel at the edge of the light. The moonbeam warms your knees slightly, even through the stone. You begin the chant, Not loud, just a hum that grows into syllables. It's the middle night ritual, meant to honor the journey of the moon across the sky and into the underworld, where it must battle serpents and chaos until dawn. You're not sure if that's literally happening, but the story has a certain drama. The god in question, Khonsu, the moon deity, isn't as flashy as Ra or as dramatic as Osiris, but he has his moments, especially on nights like this, when his light steals the show. You chant for several minutes, letting the words rise and fall like breath. Then you pause, lean forward, and carefully place your offering. A small alabaster cup filled with milk and honey. It glows under the moonlight, like something enchanted. You bow again, low and steady. The light is beginning to shift. It only lasts a short while, maybe 5 minutes, maybe 10, depending on the season. You stay kneeling until it fades, until the last silver trace slips off the altar like a sigh. And then, darkness again. You rise slowly, joints cracking in quiet protest. You extinguish the votives, one by one, until your lamp is the only light again. You glance once more at the center of the room, where the jar still rests, quiet and untouched, still sealed, still waiting. You back away, drawing the veil closed behind you. The corridor outside feels almost noisy by comparison. You hear distant footsteps, the clink of pottery, and somewhere, a very faint sneeze. You're not sure if it was human. Could have been the cat, or the crocodile, or the god of seasonal allergies. Hard to say. As you walk, you start humming one of the less sacred chants. Just something to keep your brain from slipping into full drowsiness. The melody is repetitive, vaguely annoying, and impossible to forget once it's in your head, which is probably why it was used in the festival of the cattle god, a ceremony famous for going on far too long. You round a corner and nearly bump into another priest carrying a basket of spent incense sticks. You exchange sleepy nods, both of you too tired to speak, but too polite to ignore each other. He disappears into a side room, and you keep walking toward the minor shrine corridor. The moon may have passed the altar, but your work isn't finished. In fact, it's just complicated slightly, because now it's time to tend to the lesser gods. Oh yes, the minor deities, the ones who don't get grand statues or central altars, but still demand attention. The household spirits, the fertility spirits, the weird ones that only exist in a single scroll from 400 years ago and whose names are pronounced with 4 glottal stops and a cough. You arrive at the minor shrine alcoves, narrow shelves carved directly into the wall, each holding a small figurine, a bowl of sand, and usually some offering someone left behind hours ago. You kneel before the first one. It's a frog goddess, probably Hecate, midwife to the gods, or possibly just a well-carved frog. You whisper her name anyway, just in case. You move slowly down the row, offering a pinch of incense to each. One god wants beer. One wants pomegranate seeds. One, curiously, seems to require the smell of freshly baked bread, which you can't exactly summon right now. So you wave a piece of linen in the air and hope that counts. You smile to yourself. Somewhere in this hallway of sleepy little statues is one who might actually be the most important of all. You just don't know which one. The light of your lamp dances across their polished surfaces, casting wobbly shadows that stretch across the walls like dreaming animals. You finish the circuit with a nod, your breath steady, your steps slower now. You're officially halfway through the night, which means you'll either drift into ritual-induced serenity or fall asleep standing up next to a jackal-headed incense burner. Both are acceptable outcomes. Your eyelids are starting to get a little heavy now, but you know the path by heart. You shuffle through a darkened corridor, your lamp bobbing gently in your hand, casting flickers of golden light over the sandstone walls. Every once in a while, you pass a column with a familiar face carved into it. Sometimes a lion-headed goddess with narrowed eyes, sometimes a cow-eared deity who looks like she's just woken from a nap herself. This is the part of the night where your mind begins to wander. You wonder what these gods do when no one's watching. Do they stretch? Do they complain about the quality of the incense? Does Thoth ever misplace his own scrolls? Historians still argue whether the Egyptians truly believed their statues housed divine essence, or if it was all symbolic. Some say both were true at once, which sounds about right. You, personally, think the gods have a sense of humor, especially the one with the baboon face, who always seems to be grinning a little too knowingly. You reach your next station, one of the most delicate parts of your shift: antechamber purification. See, while the central shrine holds the main deity, the surrounding chambers hold everything else: ritual tools, sacred linens, figurines, and of course, scrolls. Endless scrolls. All of it must be kept ritually pure, which means someone, i.e., you, must go room by room, waving incense, sprinkling water, and whispering phrases like "banish unclean things" and "purify this vessel," while trying not to sneeze directly onto the sacred textiles. You open a side door and step into the scroll archive. The air is dry and papery, like someone filled the room with very old knowledge and then forgot to dust it for 2 centuries. Rows of shelves stretch floor to ceiling, each containing tightly rolled scrolls wrapped in linen and labeled in ancient shorthand. The writing style has changed so much that even you, a trained priest, can only read maybe half of them. The rest are mysteries, possibly ritual recipes, possibly very fancy shopping lists. You walk slowly through the aisle, gently tapping the floor with your staff and whispering a purification chant. The staff isn't magical. It's mostly to make you feel like you're doing something important, which you are, in theory. You stop before a shelf marked with a red stripe. This one contains scrolls used only during the Opet festival, a yearly celebration where the god Amun travels from Karnak to Luxor in an elaborate bark procession. A real highlight of the divine calendar. Right now, though, these scrolls are just resting. You nod to them respectfully and move on. One scroll is out of place, set at an odd angle, like someone hastily returned it. You gently reach for it and pause. The title reads, "Instruction for the Banishing of Snakes from a Sleeping Chamber." You blink. That's oddly specific, and potentially useful. You're tempted to unroll it just to see what qualifies as snake-banishing magic. Lemon juice, dancing, chanting "nope" very loudly? You resist. There's a protocol. Instead, you straighten it gently and continue your sweep. The next room is darker. This one stores statues not currently in use, miniature effigies of gods who, for whatever reason, are on a sort of divine sabbatical. You light a small votive and walk slowly between the shelves. Tiny stone figures of hippos, falcons, cobras, and a very smug-looking ibis line the walls. One catches your eye, a crocodile god, curled elegantly in a lounging position, wearing what appears to be a party crown. You don't remember him from the training scrolls. He might be a regional variant, or he might just be decorative. Either way, you give him an extra sprinkle of lotus-scented water. You've seen what happens when crocodile gods get jealous. A fringed tidbit floats back into your memory. Some priests once placed tiny mirrors in front of statues so they could watch themselves being worshipped. It was thought to enhance their divine ego, making them more generous with blessings. You glance around. No mirrors here, just you and the gods and the smell of lavender smoke. You exit quietly and return to the main corridor. Time to head toward the cleansing basin. No matter how many purification rituals you've done, you always return to the water. It's symbolic, practical, and really quite refreshing, especially when you're barely awake and starting to think your linen kilt is growing moss. The basin room is one of your favorites. It's simple, just a circular pool carved into the stone floor, fed by an underground channel from the Nile, filtered through layers of sand and gravel. The water is icy cold and still. You kneel beside it, whisper another short prayer, and rinse your hands, your arms, your face. The chill snaps your brain into temporary clarity, which lasts about 3.5 minutes before the drowsiness returns. The truth is, the rituals aren't meant to keep you awake. They're meant to keep you anchored. Because time gets weird inside a temple. There are no clocks. No windows. Just oil lamps and moonlight, and tasks to be done in sequence. You've lost track of the hour, but you know by the ache in your shoulders and the pattern of the chanting from other priests that it's just past the midpoint of the night. The Nile breeze wafts in through a carved vent. It smells like wet clay and river reeds. For a moment, you're tempted to sneak outside, to dip your toes into the river and pretend you're just a fisherman taking a midnight stroll. But you don't. Because next comes a very particular obligation. Reading the dream scrolls. That's right, ancient Egyptians took dreams seriously, like national policy levels of seriousness. There are entire scrolls devoted to decoding them, with helpful entries like, "If one dreams of a lion sleeping, prosperity will come. If one dreams of eating onions, betrayal is near. If one dreams of flying into the sun, maybe don't tell anyone." You step into the chamber of interpretation, a small room with a raised dais and a low bench. 2 other priests are already seated, eyes half closed, taking notes on fresh papyrus, as one of them reads aloud from the scroll of dream signs. His voice is dry and rhythmic. You join them, murmuring agreement when appropriate, and adding your own observation about a recent dream involving crocodiles on stilts. It's hard to say whether it was symbolic or just the result of spoiled fish stew. Historians still argue whether dream interpretation was meant as prophecy, psychology, or entertainment for very bored priests. But here, in the soft lamplight, you treat it seriously. Every dream gets a hearing, every symbol a whisper of divine logic. You write your notes carefully and fold them into the scroll holder. Maybe one day, someone will interpret your dreams. Or maybe not. Either way, the gods are listening. Your shift continues. Your feet shuffle softly over stone. The lamp flickers. And somewhere, deep in the belly of the temple, another priest begins to sing. The priest's song echoes softly down the corridor, its tones rising and falling like ripples on the Nile at dawn. You pause, just for a moment, to let the sound wrap around you like gauze. It's one of the oldest hymns, dedicated to the rebirth of Ra, sung only during the 3rd watch of the night. There's something comforting about hearing it now. It tells you, you're not alone in this quiet temple maze. Somewhere, someone else is also trying to stay awake without falling into the offering basin. You move onward, guided by muscle memory now, turning left at the pillar with the cracked ankh, and right at the faded painting of a goose-headed man that no one can identify anymore. He's just there, watching, probably judging your posture. Now comes one of the strangest, most delicate parts of the nightly routine: statue activation and deactivation. Yes, you heard that right. You see, the Egyptians didn't just build statues to admire from afar. They believed certain rituals could literally awaken the god's essence within them. Not in a terrifying, now it walks way, although that would definitely help keep you awake, but more in a now the divine can receive offerings sense. Tonight, it's your turn to attend to a smaller statue, one of Thoth in his baboon form, perched on a pedestal in a private side shrine. The room smells faintly of myrrh and dried flowers. You kneel, light a fresh cone of incense, and begin the opening of the mouth ritual. Not on a mummy this time, but on the statue itself. You gently touch a ritual adze to the lips of the stone figure, speaking soft words. May your mouth be opened so that you may breathe. May your eyes be opened so that you may see the offerings given. Historians still argue whether this was literal ritual animism or elaborate symbolism. Frankly, you don't have the energy to debate it. All you know is that once the statue's mouth is opened, it's technically aware. So you do your best not to insult it by yawning mid-prayer. You lay a piece of bread and a sip of beer before it. Yes, even Baboon Thoth appreciates carbs, and whisper a brief petition for clarity and wisdom. Then, with a final breath of incense, you close the ritual, touching the adze in reverse to symbolically reseal the statue's awareness until the next day. You back out slowly. You always do, just in case. Not far from there is another curious space you only visit on certain nights: the Library of Restricted Scrolls. You've heard the whispers. This is where the temple stores its weirder stuff. Dream omens involving plagues, unapproved hymns written in the margins of older texts, even a scroll that supposedly outlines how to turn someone into a cat. You're 80% sure it's metaphorical. The other 20% is why you don't touch anything in there without gloves. You stand at the threshold, but don't go in. Not tonight. Not when you're already tired enough to confuse a hieroglyph of a loaf of bread with a sandal. You simply bow toward the sealed cabinet. Then make your way back toward the inner sanctum. Along the way, you pass another priest, younger than you, wide-eyed and carrying a polished silver mirror. You exchange a silent nod. The "we're both too tired to speak, but spiritually in this together" kind of nod. He's probably on mirror polishing duty. A vital role. After all, gods must admire themselves before sunrise. Now comes a real treat: temple maintenance. That's sarcasm. You duck into a narrow alcove that holds an elaborate stone basin. The water here is for scrubbing, not your hands, but the sacred instruments. You pick up a bronze blade used for cutting ritual bread and a thin reed brush. Slowly, methodically, you clean each object. No soap, just sand and care. There's a meditative rhythm to it. Scrub, rinse, place. Scrub, rinse, place. Some objects are shaped like lotus flowers. Some are more unsettling, like the one that looks suspiciously like a spoon but has a tiny carved eye in the center. You don't ask questions. You just keep going. It reminds you of a fringe belief once popular among lower-ranking priests, that if you clean a sacred object with true focus, you might receive a vision from the god it serves. You've never had a vision. But once, you did fall asleep mid-scrubbing and dreamed a talking ibis told you to stop overcooking your lentils. Make of that what you will. Once everything is clean, you dry your hands on your sash and head to the offering prep room. This is a busy place just before dawn. So your job is to prepare the preliminary items: water vessels, salt, and natron. Natron is a salty, chalky powder used in purification. Think of it as the ancient Egyptian version of spiritual baking soda. It absorbs impurities, both physical and metaphysical. You scoop it carefully into small ceramic dishes and set them beside each offering tray. You pause to straighten a bowl of figs. One is a little too squishy, so you replace it from the backup basket. Offerings must be perfect. After all, they're not just food, they're messages. That's something modern historians sometimes miss. Yes, the gods were given bread and beer and geese and onions, but these weren't just snacks. They were symbolic acts of communication. Here, I give this to you, meant I acknowledge your power. A well-roasted duck said more than any scroll could. And so, when you see a tray missing its lotus blossom garnish, you fix it. Because you are a priest. Because that duck is doing spiritual heavy lifting. Because it's almost morning. The first hints of light are beginning to touch the outer edges of the temple. You can't see the sun yet, but you feel it. A subtle shift in the air. A change in the stone's temperature. The faint scent of date palms stirred by the Nile breeze. Your next task awaits. Waking the main deity. Not metaphorically. You'll enter the holiest chamber soon, with the high priest, and together you'll lift the veil, unseal the shrine, and awaken the god with hymns, incense, and offerings. But not quite yet. For now, you kneel beside the tray of natron and close your eyes, just for a breath. You whisper a quiet chant under your breath, not one from the scrolls, just something your mentor used to say. May the world rise with the sun, and not before I'm ready. The stone is cool beneath your knees. The incense has faded. And the temple waits. The moment has come. The last breath of night still lingers in the rafters as you approach the most sacred space in the temple. The inner naos, the heart of the divine. Everything has led to this. The purifications, the hymns, the anointings, the awkward nap near the natron jars, and now you stand before the sealed shrine of the god. It's not something you do alone. The high priest is already here, tall and austere, draped in fresh linen. His beard has been re-oiled, his kohl reapplied, and somehow he looks like he's slept. You know he hasn't. No one does. You exchange a quiet glance, no words, and together begin the process. First comes the unlocking of the outer doors. They're heavy wood, inlaid with copper and etched with hieroglyphs that remind you exactly who resides inside. Not just a statue, but a living essence. The deity does not sleep, but the statue does. Or rather, it waits. You unfasten the bolts slowly. Each click echoes. Then, the high priest steps forward with the offering torch, its flame small, steady, never wavering. That alone feels like a miracle in this drafty sanctuary. With a steady hand, he lights a fresh incense bundle and waves the smoke gently across the sealed shrine. You follow with a cup of pure water, sprinkling a fine mist before the doors. Symbolic cleansing. And then, reverently, the shrine is opened. Inside, the figure of the god gleams faintly in the torchlight, crafted from precious stone, polished gold, obsidian eyes that catch the flicker. For a moment, all motion stops. Even your breath feels louder than it should. You are standing in the presence. Now begins the waking ritual. You start by offering the first hymn of the morning, your voice joined by the high priests in careful unison. The words are old, older than you, older than your teacher's teacher's teacher. They speak of light, of renewal, of rising from darkness. The god, according to tradition, accepts these words as nourishment, Not metaphorically. This is a feeding, a communion. The statue, once inanimate, is now alert, receptive, aware. Historians still argue whether this was truly seen as awakening a literal god or as a theatrical act to focus worship. Some say it was more of a mnemonic device. Wake the symbol, wake the people's spirit. Others insist priests truly believed the divine essence resided in that chamber every morning. You, as you help adjust the linen around the statue's shoulders, are inclined to say, it's both, and neither. And also, shh, this is not the time to debate. You anoint the statue's forehead with a dab of sacred oil, a blend of lotus, frankincense, and something even you don't recognize. Probably something ancient and expensive, ground up by hand and locked in a clay jar with a scarab carved on the lid. The scent hits you with a wave of memory. You first smelled it as a child. On your very first visit to this chamber, trembling beside your uncle. Next come the offerings. Not just food, but items of beauty and honor. Fresh-cut papyrus, bright cloth, hand-rolled incense, a single duck feather. The duck feather is especially important today. A rare tribute, chosen specifically for the day of jubilation. That's today, apparently, although you still think someone made that name up to cover for the late duck delivery yesterday. You place the items at the base of the statue. The high priest recites a final verse, short, powerful. Awakened one, rise in glory. Shine with the light of the first dawn. Be pleased, be honored, and walk with your people. Then, silence. This moment is always strange, tense, but also still. You're supposed to feel the presence of the god here, in this hush. Some nights, you think you do. Others, you mostly just feel the cold of the stone. The ritual ends not with a bang, but with a sealing. The statue isn't locked away immediately. There's a period, just before sunrise, where it remains visible, active, awake. That's when temple visitors may arrive, if it's a festival day, or if the high priest declares a public blessing. But today, it's just the inner circle. And so you begin the procession of daily maintenance. The now awakened god receives an outfit change. Yes, outfit. You and another priest carefully remove the old linen draping and replace it with fresh cloth, undyed, stiff, and starched. There's a whole debate about the color of divine linens, by the way. Some sources say white is mandatory. Others say colored threads were used in some cities. One scroll mentions a statue dressed entirely in gold-dusted fishnet, which, well, you're not in that temple, and frankly, you're okay with that. After dressing, you apply cosmetic touches. Kohl around the eyes, a fresh red pigment for the lips, and, get this, a tiny dab of perfume behind the ears. Statues don't have ears, obviously, but there's a symbolic ear spot. You don't question it. Then you bow once more and begin to back away. But the work isn't over yet. You now prepare for the most public-facing part of the priestly day, the opening of the outer temple gates. This is when villagers, scribes, merchants, and even the occasional bored teenager show up to pay respects, leave offerings, or just hang around hoping for free bread. You head to the front hall, still warm from the rising sun, and unlock the doors. Outside, the world has changed. The Nile gleams, palm trees sway. You hear the faint jingle of anklets and the clatter of donkey carts. The city is waking, but in your bones, you feel like you're winding down. And yet, you still have tasks ahead. You meet with the bread steward to confirm the offering rotations. You send a novice to fetch more natron. You scold a goose that has somehow made it into the entry courtyard again. And then, You retreat back into the shadows of the sanctuary. There's one last task before you can consider rest: recording everything. Each act of ritual must be logged. Not for the gods, they don't care about paperwork, but for the temple archive. These clay and papyrus records serve as a form of sacred accountability. You sit in a scribe's niche, pick up your stylus, and begin. Third month of Akhet, day of jubilation, dawn ritual performed, offerings accepted, linen changed, coal refreshed, duck feather offered. You pause. Should you mention the late duck delivery? Nah. You finish the record, seal it with a clay token, and place it in the storage urn. And with that, the sun is fully up. The god is dressed, fed, and pleased. You, however, are running on nothing but incense fumes and determination. Time to find a quiet corner before the mid-morning rituals begin. Just 5 minutes. Just one nap. You curl up near a sun-warmed wall and whisper to yourself, "May the god watch over this nap." The temple does not stop, not for naps, not for heat, not even for priests with aching feet and soot in their eyelashes. 5 minutes becomes 7, maybe 10, and just as you're about to drift off entirely, someone coughs nearby. It's a junior acolyte, barely old enough to hold a broom straight, hovering near your elbow like an over-caffeinated ibis. He looks both apologetic and urgent. You already know what he's going to say. They need you in the storeroom. Of course they do. You dust off your robe, stretch your back, and try to remember if you've eaten anything since the previous sunset. Probably not. But there's no time now. Duty calls. The temple storeroom is a narrow, echoing space beneath the south wing, packed floor to ceiling with offerings: bread loaves, clay jars of beer, baskets of fruit, bolts of linen, boxes of perfume, and yes, even the occasional petrified onion. Inventory is serious business. Offerings must be recorded, sorted, and refreshed. What goes bad is removed discreetly, often repurposed to feed the temple staff or distributed to the poor. What's still fresh is scheduled for tomorrow's rituals. Nothing goes to waste, at least not officially. Today, however, you're not there for inventory. You're there because something smells off. The head steward meets you at the door, pinching his nose. "It's the pomegranate wine again," he says, tone flat. "A batch went sour. It's leaking." You sigh. This is the third time this month. You follow him inside, stepping over reed mats and ducking under a dangling fish charm. For good luck, it doesn't work. Sure enough, a clay amphora has split, sticky red liquid pooling beneath it like some kind of sacrificial mishap. The smell is sharp, vinegary, and absolutely not divine. You mop it up with a bundle of old linen, which probably had grander ambitions in life. A second priest seals off the remaining jugs with fresh wax, and you scrawl a quick note onto a wooden tag. Batch 14, do not use, may cause divine offense and gas. Quirky tidbit of the day. Ancient Egyptian temples sometimes served as breweries. Not metaphorically, actual breweries. Beer was a staple of offerings, and priests would regularly check the yeast and grain mixtures. You've even heard whispers of a priest in Memphis who was also famous for his spiced barley brew. They say it could cure headaches, or cause them. Depends on the batch. Once the cleanup is done, you're rewarded not with rest, but with another assignment. The outer courtyard needs sweeping before the midday procession. Of course it does. You hand your mop to the nearest novice and trudge back upstairs, where the sunlight is now blazing, and the tiles feel like they've been slow roasting since sunrise. The courtyard is deceptively peaceful. Palm trees rustle. A few cats lounge in the shade, utterly uninterested in the divine work happening around them. One of them eyes you lazily as you start sweeping, half mocking, half impressed. This isn't just about tidiness. It's preparation for a ceremonial walkthrough. Today's theme, Harmony of the Two Lands, which sounds majestic, but mostly means the priests parade around with symbolic objects, while the villagers watch and pretend not to be sunburned. You grab the ceremonial standard, a long pole topped with a carved symbol of Mayat, the goddess of order and truth. It's heavier than it looks. Everything is heavier than it looks when you've been awake for 24 hours. Still, the symbolism is nice. The standard leads the way, representing the idea that truth and balance come before all else. Historians still argue whether these courtyard processions were purely symbolic or held administrative power. Some think they served as visible declarations of the temple's role in maintaining cosmic balance. Others suggest they were just clever ways to keep the locals engaged, like a divine open house. Either way, the villagers are already gathering. You nod politely at an elderly woman balancing a basket of dates on her head. She nods back with a toothless grin and mutters, "Tell the god thanks for last week's rain." You will. The procession begins. Two drummers keep a slow rhythm, followed by flute players in identical linen tunics. Behind them walk the offering bearers, carrying trays of bread, jars of oil, feathers, amulets, even a fresh fish wrapped in lotus leaves. Everything moves in a hypnotic loop around the perimeter of the courtyard, like the sun tracking across the sky. You're in the middle ranks today, walking just behind the high priest and just ahead of the junior scribes. You hold your standard high, trying not to wobble. It's harder than it looks, especially when the breeze picks up and your robe turns into a wind sail. The scent of lotus and frankincense fills the air, carried by temple maidens waving bundles of herbs. Kids weave between the pillars, trying to get a closer look. Somewhere, a rooster crows dramatically, as if it, too, is part of the ritual. You round the final corner of the courtyard, and the high priest raises his hand. Everyone stops. He lifts his voice, slow, deep, rehearsed. Let Ma'at be upheld. Let order rise with the sun. Let chaos fall behind us. It's always those three lines, and even though you've heard them 100 times, something about them sticks today. Maybe it's the way the sunlight hits the stone walls. Maybe it's the weight of the standard in your hand. Or maybe you're just extremely tired and starting to feel a little philosophical. Either way, the ceremony ends. The crowd claps politely. A few toss coins into the temple's donation basin. A child waves at you. You wave back. You return the standard to its place near the entrance, where another priest gives you a nod of thanks and offers you a cool cloth soaked in rose water. You press it to your face with a grateful sigh. And now, finally, you have a moment. You sit in the shade, sipping from a clay cup of diluted beer, letting the soft chatter of the courtyard lull your thoughts. The breeze is kind. The gods are quiet. The temple breathes with you. You don't have long until the afternoon chants begin. But in this moment, the world is still. And you, miraculously, are at peace. Peace never lasts long in the temple. Not when the sun is sliding toward its blinding afternoon peak, and the statues are due for their midday awakenings. Yes, awakenings. Though technically lifeless, the gods' statues are treated like royalty at nap time and toddlers at wake-up. And guess whose job it is to gently rouse a several-ton granite deity from its metaphysical slumber? That's right, you. You gather the cleansing materials, natron salts, palm oil, linen cloths, a silver mirror to catch the light. plus a ceremonial comb, because even divine beards must not go scraggly. The sacred chamber, deep within the inner sanctum, feels cooler than the rest of the temple. Heavy incense still lingers in the air from the morning offerings, its scent a sleepy mix of myrrh and damp stone. As you step over the threshold, the shadows seem to thicken. You whisper a soft chant under your breath, more out of habit than belief. It's said that entering the god space without proper tone could result in, well, spontaneous vaporization or mild social embarrassment. Historians still argue whether these taboos were mystical or simply methods of keeping underqualified priests out of the high chambers. You approach the statue of Amun-Ra. His face is serene, carved in polished obsidian, and his headdress gleams faintly under the flickering torchlight. You bow, lightly touch your forehead to the cool ground, and begin the awakening ritual. Rise, O Radiant One. The sun has not dared travel the sky without your blessing. Awaken and let your gaze sweep the horizon. It's part poetry, part alarm clock. You sprinkle water along the base of the statue, then anoint its feet with scented oil. You wipe away any dust, using a soft linen cloth and impossibly slow movements. A single drop of sweat slides down your neck, and you resist the urge to wipe it away. You're being watched, not by the god, necessarily, but by the other priests who've filed in silently behind you. It's your turn today. Their turn will come. Halfway through the ritual, the mirror comes out. You position it to reflect a sunbeam directly onto the statue's face, symbolizing divine awareness. If you get the angle wrong, the light just blinds you and misses entirely. If you get it right, well, nothing happens exactly, but it feels like something could. A flicker, a shimmer. The room seems to inhale. The god is awake. Now comes the quirky bit. The god gets dressed. Yes, literally. You and two others help adorn the statue with fresh linen wrappings, then layer on gold thread sashes, tiny pectorals, and amulets shaped like ankhs and scarabs. Each item must be arranged exactly right, down to the folds of cloth across the chest. Once, you draped a sash slightly off-center and got a week of latrine duty. Another time, a fellow priest accidentally tore the wrapping and claimed to have been cursed with hiccups for 3 days straight. Historians believe these rituals stemmed from a complex belief in divine presence through objects. A statue wasn't just stone, it was the god, present on earth, temporarily inhabiting their image. The final touch? A touch of kohl to the eyes. Not for vanity, okay, maybe a little, but to symbolize vision, awareness, and protection. You use a special brush made from reeds, dabbing carefully beneath each obsidian lid. By the time the process is done, nearly an hour has passed. You bow again, back away without turning your back to the god, divine rudeness, and exhale once you're outside the sanctum. You probably weren't holding your breath, but you kind of were. Down in the open halls, the temperature has risen. You can feel it in the bricks underfoot, and the shimmering heat radiating off the limestone walls. Some priests head toward the side chambers for their afternoon readings. Others polish bronze offering plates or rearrange temple scrolls with the weary satisfaction of people who've alphabetized the same texts a dozen times already. You wander to the scribal hall. It's shaded, quiet, and filled with rows of reed pens, stacked palettes, and scrolls laid out on wooden tables like sleeping serpents. You flip open a scroll near the window. It's an older one, the ink faded, but the hieratic script still legible. It tells of a past festival honoring the river god Hapi. Apparently, someone once released 200 painted ducks down the Nile in tribute. Some say it was a metaphor. Others think it was just a lot of ducks. The day's heat makes your eyelids heavy. You lean your elbow against the edge of the table and let your mind drift. Through the window, you hear the faint splashing of water, the braying of donkeys, the far-off laughter of villagers. For a moment, you allow yourself the thought, what would it be like to sleep here, unnoticed? But you don't. The high priest steps in and clears his throat, a subtle, practiced sound that carries all the weight of a temple gong. You rise. He hands you a small scroll sealed with red wax. It's marked with the sign of Sekhmet, the lion-headed goddess of war and healing. Urgent, he says. A village priest has requested ritual consultation. You'll leave before sunset. A field assignment. Oh, great. You give a shallow nod. Understood. Field trips aren't terrible. Just long, hot, and usually involving at least one disagreement about proper incense ratios. Still, it's a break from routine. And maybe, just maybe, the village has better beer, or softer mats, or both. As you roll up the scroll and tuck it into your linen sash, you catch your own reflection in a polished bronze plate. Your eyes look a little older, your hair a little dustier. Still, you're a priest of the temple, a custodian of order. A servant of gods who blink once a day and get dressed better than most nobles. You'll sleep eventually. Just not yet. There's still the matter of Sekhmet's village, and who knows what quirky surprise awaits there. By the time you've packed your satchel, papyrus scrolls, a handful of amulets, a tiny bronze Sekhmet figurine with one ear chipped, don't ask. The sun has dipped just low enough to make shadows stretch like lazy cats across the courtyard. You make your way through the temple gates, sandals crunching softly over sand and gravel. A donkey is waiting for you at the edge of the compound, tethered to a fig tree that may or may not still be alive. It regards you with an expression that screams, "Really? We're doing this now?" Yes, you are doing this now. You swing the satchel over your shoulder, give the donkey a pat, it grunts, and begin the slow, plodding journey out of Thebes toward the village that requested divine consultation. The breeze off the Nile is faint, but welcome. The smell of date palms, old bricks, and something slightly fishy lingers in the air. This particular village is just a half-day's ride, about 90 minutes if the donkey's in a mood, 3 hours if it stops every time a frog croaks. As the temple fades behind you, replaced by stalks of barley and scattered huts, your mind drifts to the reason for the summons. The high priest wasn't clear, but any time Sekhmet's involved, things tend to be dramatic. She's the goddess of healing. Yes, but also of plague, fire, and general cosmic overreaction. Legend has it, she once almost wiped out humanity because someone threw shade at her temple curtains. Historians still argue whether that myth was meant to symbolize divine wrath or just really aggressive interior decorating policies. After a while, the road thins into packed earth. Children play nearby, chasing each other with palm fronds. An older woman offers you a fig as you pass. You accept with a nod. Never say no to figs. Or grandmothers. When you finally reach the village shrine, it's exactly what you expect. Small, slightly crooked, and perfumed with the unmistakable scent of too much incense and not enough ventilation. A wiry man in a tattered priest's robe rushes up to you. "Praise to Sekhmet, you've arrived. You must come, now. She's not well." "Who?" you ask, stepping inside. He points toward a girl curled on a reed mat near the altar. Maybe 12 years old, wrapped in a linen sheet. Forehead slick with sweat. She hasn't spoken in 3 days. Her mother believes she's been touched by a desert spirit. Touched by a spirit? More likely dehydration or a heat-borne fever. Still, you play your role. You sit beside her, open your satchel, and place the small Sekhmet figurine at her side. Then, the ritual begins. You light a small wad of resinous incense, sweet, with a sharp edge. You grind natron salt into a bowl, mixing in bits of crushed carob and dried lotus petals. You murmur the invocation, "O lioness, whose breath scorches disease, turn thy burning gaze toward health. Let thy claws become balm, thy roar become rest." It's poetic enough that the villagers watching behind you begin to murmur among themselves, hopeful and half-hypnotized. You dip your fingers in the bowl and draw tiny lines across the girl's wrists, protective sigils that most people mistake for hieroglyphs, but are really just stylized cats and zigzags. Hey, it works. After a few moments, she stirs, opens one eye. "Thirsty," she rasps. You smile. Good. That means Sekhmet is bored with punishing you. The mother rushes forward with a cup of water. The girl drinks greedily, and someone in the crowd starts weeping with relief. You look over at the village priest, who bows so low you're worried he might sprain something. "Thank you," he whispers. "Will you stay for the night?" You consider. It's been a long day. Your donkey has probably wandered off and joined a traveling circus by now. You nod. "Yes, but I'm sleeping near the shrine. I snore, and the gods find it endearing." You settle near the low altar, laying your linen roll down on the packed dirt. The air is cooler now, the stars just starting to wink into view. Someone brings you lentils and flatbread, possibly the same flatbread from last week, but you're too tired to care. The villagers keep their distance, treating you like a cross between a visiting noble and a mildly radioactive scroll. Still, as you stretch out, the familiar weight of temple duty lifts just a little. There's something about being out here, in the open air, away from the stone walls and strict routines, that lets your thoughts expand like the sky overhead. You remember something you were told as a novice, that a true priest isn't bound to stone, but to service. That temples are portable, carried in the heart. Or, in your case, in a slightly smelly satchel and some memorized prayers. Nearby, someone's playing a flute, off-key, but soft enough to be pleasant. You think of the girl's eyes opening, of her first word, of how even the act of caring, when ritualized, becomes sacred. It's not always about the gods. Sometimes it's about reminding humans they're not alone. You pull the linen wrap tighter and look up at Orion's belt glowing faintly above the horizon. And for once, you don't dream of scrolls or incense or beetle-shaped amulets. You dream of lions curled by hearths and cool water running through warm hands. The rooster starts at an hour no one asked for. You groan, eyes still closed, vaguely considering whether Sekhmet would smite a bird on your behalf. Probably not. She's not much of a morning person either, if her stories are to be believed. After all, anyone who gets tricked out of a rage bender by beer dyed red probably has questionable sleep hygiene. You stretch on your makeshift bed of linen and reed mat, blinking at the morning haze. The village is already stirring, people hauling water from the well, grinding grain, and speaking in those warm, low tones that fill small spaces like steam. You sit up, dust clinging to your robes, and remember, you're still technically on duty. A boy brings you a bowl of emmer porridge with honey. Warm, sweet, slightly burnt. You eat it gratefully, legs crossed near the shrine. The girl you tended to is already sitting up, chewing on bread and complaining about being hungry. You smile. Definitely cured. The villagers offer thanks in that humble over-the-top way country people often do. A woman tries to give you a chicken. A man insists you take a jar of pickled radishes. You thank them and accept a handful of dried dates instead. Easier to carry. Less likely to peck you. As you gather your things, the village priest approaches with something wrapped in cloth. He presses it into your hand. A gift, he says, from the family. You unwrap it gently. A small bead necklace, likely made by the girl's mother. The beads are carved to resemble lotus blossoms and small fish. It's charming, mismatched, and utterly sincere. You nod. Tell them Sekhmet will be pleased. He bows. And you? You raise an eyebrow. Depends how far my donkey has wandered. Spoiler. It's quite far. You spend the better part of an hour trudging through uneven brush, calling your donkey by the very creative name, Donkey. Eventually, you find it loitering near a thicket, chewing something unidentifiable and looking deeply unrepentant. After some gentle negotiations and 2 bribes of fig, it agrees to let you climb on. The journey back is longer in the rising sun. Heat makes the path shimmer. At one point you spot a crocodile half submerged in an irrigation ditch. You give it a wide berth. It blinks at you lazily, as if to say, "Go on. I'm full." By the time you reach the outskirts of Thebes, the temple pylons come into view like monumental bookmarks against the horizon. A relief. Not because you missed the walls, but because you missed the shade. The temple guards nod as you pass, though one of them comments on the smell, and you can't tell whether he means you or the donkey. Both are fair. Inside, the cool stone embraces you again. Echoes soften your footsteps as you head toward your quarters. You drop your satchel beside the bed and collapse with a sigh that sounds entirely too dramatic for someone who mostly waved incense around and said poetic things. Still, the work is tiring, sacred even, and that sort of tired feels good. A papyrus scroll waits on your sleeping mat, left by one of the senior scribes. It's an update from the House of Life, where sick nobles are kept in shaded chambers and fanned by overworked apprentices. One of them requests your presence for a ritual of purgative flame. Translation: someone drank spoiled wine and thinks they're cursed. You groan. You had hoped for at least a half day of rest. But then you remember the girl's face, her mother's tears, the quiet song someone played while you drifted to sleep beside the altar. And so, you splash water on your face, rub oil into your wrists, and prepare your things again. Because this is what priesthood means. Not just the grand rituals and polished sandals, but the road, the sick, the thank you figs, the uncertain diagnoses, the whispered hopes that someone, anyone, knows what to do. You pass by the temple kitchens, snag a slice of honey cake on your way, it's either divine providence or strategic timing, and head for the noble's estate. This time, the patient is sprawled across 5 cushions, dramatically moaning that his stomach burns like Horus's eye. You nod sympathetically and begin arranging your tools with a calm, methodical rhythm that says, "This is not my first overindulgent cousin situation." You offer a tiny clay dish of crushed caraway and honey to settle his stomach. You chant the standard fire-dispelling spell, adapted to sound slightly more urgent than usual, for dramatic effect. You touch a bronze ankh to his forehead and whisper, "Fire come forth, flame be tamed," as Sekhmet's wrath returns to sleep. It's not bad, poetically speaking. You might reuse that one. He sighs and stops moaning, perhaps soothed by the prayer, Or perhaps just relieved someone finally paid attention to him? The noble's wife, far more sensible, thanks you with a polite nod and sends her servant to bring out a jar of perfumed oil. She hands it to you. For your trouble. You accept it, bowing gently. Then, with a wry smile, "And if the stomach fire returns, try fewer figs. 5 is ambitious." She laughs. I'll remind him. The sun begins to dip again as you head back toward the temple. Another day, another intervention, another story added to your quiet, unseen list. You pause under a tamarisk tree on the edge of the temple gardens, sipping cool water from a clay cup. You glance at the necklace you were gifted earlier, now tucked into your sash. And maybe, for the first time today, you allow yourself to just be. Not a priest, not a healer, not a speaker for the gods, just a tired, thoughtful person under a tree, with the scent of lotus and sandalwood hanging faintly in the air, and the quiet knowledge that tomorrow, the work begins again. Evening at the temple returns with the same quiet rhythms. You move through the stone corridors like a breeze, light, present, mostly unnoticed. The sandstone walls glow with the warm gold of twilight, every hieroglyph casting soft shadows that make the gods seem half alive. You pass the statue of Anubis in his usual seated pose and, without thinking, give a subtle nod. Respect, superstition, or habit. It's hard to say anymore. Tonight, you're not called to any public ceremony. No festival, no noble's indigestion, no animal sacrifices, thank the gods. Just a small purification rite in the inner sanctum. You prepare alone, tying your sash with familiar precision. White linen robe, recently cleaned. A dab of sacred oil on each wrist. Hair still damp from a quick rinse. Curls sticking slightly to your temples. You look the part, even if your sandals are a little too worn. Before you enter the sacred chamber, you pause for the usual purification sequence. A basin of lotus water for your hands, a deep breath to clear the mind, then the short, whispered invocation to the Neteru, the divine forces, asking them to accept your small offerings without, smiting you into oblivion. You step into the chamber. It's dark, windowless, cooled by layers of stone. The air is dense with incense, kaifi again, sweet and spicy, curling upward in fine ribbons. The statue of Amun-Ra sits in silence before you, gold and lapis and obsidian, his face both expressionless and somehow stern. You bow low, setting your copper plate before the altar. A palm-sized flame, a few cloves of garlic, and a folded piece of linen with a prayer written in ink. No elaborate meal or libation this time, just symbolism, just intention. Your chant is quiet, rhythmic, practiced. Light from chaos, truth from flame, let Mayat guide and cleanse my name. Another line you wrote yourself. Not bad for a priest who mostly works by moonlight and gut instinct. As your voice echoes through the small chamber, you fall into a familiar trance-like rhythm. Your body knows what to do. Your voice flows without hesitation. Your mind, however, begins to drift, just slightly. You think of the sick girl in the village, of the noble with too much fig wine, of the scribe who once claimed the gods get bored of our prayers and just let the statues listen on their behalf. You think, with a wry smile, maybe he's not wrong. Somewhere outside, a breeze rattles a loose reed blind, and it sounds exactly like someone sighing. You close the ritual with a final bow and back away 3 steps, always 3, before exiting the chamber. You slide the stone door closed behind you with a muffled thud. The silence afterward is comforting. like a warm blanket of nothing. In the main hall, a younger priest approaches. He's gangly, earnest, and always looks slightly confused by his own robes. "They're asking for you at the western gate," he says, glancing nervously over his shoulder. "Something about a wandering ibis." You raise an eyebrow. "The bird?" He nods. "It won't leave the shrine." You stifle a laugh, grab your staff, and head out. The western gate is less formal than the grand entrance, just a pair of sturdy wooden doors flanked by sandstone pillars. And yes, indeed, there's an ibis sitting on the pedestal meant for votive offerings. It looks smug, possibly enlightened. The guards are helpless. One's waving a piece of bread at it. The other's just standing there, muttering, "Thoth, send help." You approach slowly. The ibis cocks its head at you. "Well," you whisper. You picked the right god's perch. Some believe ibis birds carry a spark of divine presence. Others think they're just particularly snooty swamp dwellers. Historians still argue whether ibis sightings near temples were considered omens or just annoying coincidences involving leftover grain. You decide to take it as a sign of good luck, or, at least, a decent excuse to stretch your legs. You hold out your hand, whisper a few nonsense syllables to sound impressive, and gently guide the bird off its perch. It flaps lazily, then glides to a low wall and resumes looking superior. Crisis averted. The guards clap like you just redirected the Nile. Back in the courtyard, a few priests are lighting the oil lamps. Their flames flicker in the dusk, casting long shadows that lean toward the sanctuary. You sit on the edge of a sandstone platform, watching the light dance. Someone brings you a mug of fermented barley drink. Not strong, but enough to warm your chest. You sip it slowly, grateful. Nearby, one of the musicians plucks a tune on a harp. The sound drifts like silk through the evening air. You don't speak. No one does. There's a reverence to these moments, when the temple exhales, when the work quiets, and the divine seems content to simply watch. You glance toward the shrine. A figure moves inside, likely the high priest, beginning his own night rituals. You nod respectfully, then lean back and stare up at the stars. They come in slow, blinking into the sky one by one as if summoned. There's Orion and Sopdet, Sirius, glowing brightly, a celestial reminder that the Nile will flood soon. Again. And the fields will bloom. Again. And the same songs, the same duties, the same small dramas will repeat themselves year after year, century after century. It sounds exhausting. And yet, under the stars, it feels oddly comforting. You close your eyes and let the quiet settle around you. Not asleep, not quite awake. Somewhere in between. Where the gods hum lullabies through stone corridors, where a priest can sit alone in the middle of sacred silence and feel, just for a moment, that he's exactly where he's meant to be. You stay out under the stars a little longer. The sandstone platform beneath you holds the day's warmth like an old friend. The courtyard has emptied now, save for the occasional rustle of linen robes and the distant bray of a donkey from the village below. You've lost track of time again, and honestly, that's becoming a skill you rather enjoy. Eventually, you stand. Your knees creak slightly. The temple seems to exhale around you, walls glowing faintly under moonlight, doorways casting sleepy shadows, and the pillars reaching upward like arms toward the sky. The kind of quiet that hums rather than rings. It's time to check the offering stores. You walk slowly past the incense vaults, nodding to the two sleepy guards stationed outside, who respond with the kind of half-salute that says, "We're definitely awake. Please don't test us." Inside, the storerooms smell of dried myrrh, spiced oils, and old papyrus. Racks of unburnt incense cones are stacked with geometric perfection. Tiny jars of honey, wrapped in waxy linen, rest beside sealed containers of sacred beer. And yes, someone has once again mislabeled the crocodile fat as date paste. Classic. You adjust a few offerings, mark a mental note to scold whoever keeps forgetting the difference, and head to the next chamber, one of the oldest in the temple. The stone here is darker, the air cooler. You can hear your own breath bounce softly off the walls. This is where the sacred tools are kept. The ritual knives, the scepters, the bronze mirrors. You pick up one mirror and tilt it toward your face. A distorted version of yourself stares back, wide-eyed, faintly amused, and slightly more tired than you realized. You replace it gently and light a small oil lamp in the corner niche. This isn't official ritual time, but you've grown used to offering a personal word of gratitude to the gods before ending the day. "Thanks for the still night," you murmur, "and for not letting that ibis fly into the sanctum." Again, a tiny breeze brushes past your arm. No windows, no doors open. You smile. Historians still argue whether priests genuinely believed in every ritual act, or if some of them simply grew into the comfort of repetition, of duty, of the strange poetry in lighting the same flame day after day, even if no one was watching. You fall into that camp. Not faith exactly, not disbelief either. More like rhythm. You douse the lamp, let the dark return, and retrace your steps to your personal chamber. It's small, quiet, a narrow bed of reeds topped with soft linen. 2 jars, one with water, one with barley drink, a small painted box with your writing tools, and a collection of prayers you keep tweaking when no one's looking. The walls here are plain, no murals, just the faint outline of palm fronds from the stencil of sunlight earlier in the day. You run your hand across the cool surface. Smooth, familiar. You sit, stretch your legs, and glance toward the small niche shelf where a figure of Hathor rests, carved in ivory and wearing the faintest hint of a smile. You nod. She nods back. Well, it feels like she does. Sometimes, after long nights, you find yourself talking to the gods less like distant powers and more like co-workers who've seen some things. You unroll one of your papyrus scraps and read a line you scribbled weeks ago. The gods do not shout. They wait. You don't remember writing it. It still feels true. You yawn. Finally. Tonight, there's no dreaming assignment, no watch duty, no sick noble or lost peasant wandering the courtyard asking if Isis does house calls. Tonight, it's just you. You lie down. The bed creaks. The linen is cool and smells faintly of rose water and stone dust. You tuck your arm beneath your head and watch the shadows on the ceiling dance with the flicker of a lamp still burning 2 doors down. Somewhere in the temple, someone's whispering prayers. Somewhere, a rat is dragging a fig down the hallway, determined not to drop it. Somewhere, a god is smiling, or at least not frowning. You let your eyelids lower, your breath slows, and the temple shifts into sleep. And now, as your breathing deepens and your thoughts soften, let the stone corridors of the temple fade into shadow. Let the scent of incense drift away like smoke on still air, leaving only the gentlest echo of warmth behind. The gods have all turned inward for the night. The flame has been extinguished. The scrolls are rolled. The halls are empty and quiet. Even the ibis has settled, its feathers puffed in a little crescent of moonlit calm. You've done enough for today. The rituals have been performed, the offerings delivered, and the silence kept. All that's left is to rest. No need to solve every mystery tonight. No need to carry the weight of the stars on your shoulders. Even the priests had their hours of stillness when the work paused and the world turned slowly on its own. So breathe in and out. Let the warm breeze of the desert night pass gently over your skin. Let your limbs grow heavy. Let the gods keep their watch, just for a while you sleep. You are safe in these ancient walls. You are quiet in your thoughts. And you are exactly where you need to be. Time stretches like golden sand, and dreams begin to gather at the edges of your vision. Soft, gentle, familiar. Good night, traveler.